May 14th, 2014, Finance Committee meeting. Minute approval from 5-2.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Monday night, the selectmen revisited Article 17 on the Conservation Commission.
Chairman, motion to reconsider.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed? All right, let me explain. We go to Article 17, what the Board of Selectmen did was leave the first part where the Board of Selectmen or Conservation Commission as appropriate, enter into conservation restriction agreement. And that's as far as it goes. It's gonna be with the Town Conservation Commission. The rest of the article will be struck. Is that right, Jerry?
The end also.
At top part, you can see very nicely, just puts it into the Conservation Commission, stop.
Okay.
I think we don't have a choice but to support it. We asked the selectmen, we agreed with everything that Monty and them brought up for preserving that land, protecting that land. We just wanted it protected by Milfordians. They went through and did it. I don't know how we can't support what we asked them to do.
Yeah, just a question, Mr. Chairman. Does this now give the Conservation Commission total control over that, or does it require town meeting vote to do something outside of the conservation land?
17.
Or do they have total?
Answer to the microphone.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we have a number of processes in town on the Conservation Commission jurisdiction, it's very common. They don't have any extraordinary control, they have no power to alienate the property, they have no power to sell it, put easements without town meeting approval. They're just in charge if there's gotta be a cleanup, if it's gotta be policed, they're in charge. But again, they have no power to alienate it, which is the important thing.
Okay. Thank you, Joey.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? So we're gonna change.
Second.
All in favor? All right, so we've changed our vote from unfavorable on Article 17 to favorable on Article 17.
We're gonna need to put something in the town meeting packet.
The town meeting package.
No,
long
the
done.
update, we said we'd give them an update,
Just add it.
so we're just gonna have to add that in.
That's
because we got 2 or 3 articles that we said we would
Yeah.
add an extra, just
we
add it in.
We'll just put it up. All right, next item on the agenda is Article 32, Capital Improvement Committee.
I haven't seen it
What's the pleasure of the committee?
If he's not here, maybe table it till later in the meeting, give him one more chance if he's 10 minutes late.
Wait till the end, you're right.
No applause, stay at the end.
Yeah, wait, yeah. Okay. We'll be here.
Yeah. All right, Article 24, Armory People, making a presentation.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say Sydney just asked me to pass something around, so it's coming just for everyone. Joyce, you're gonna have to. Oh, yeah, we'll have to get.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Everybody sit on this side.
So we like it over here.
You can't even see.
Oh, watching the Hunger Games, right? These are open.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to do, at your pleasure, is I'd like to make some brief opening remarks, just to kind of give us the history on this project, so we're all oriented as to what's been done. Then I'd like to turn it over to our architects to allow them to do their PowerPoint presentation. After that, I think our town engineer has a memorandum that she would like to present and discuss, which is ultimately going to bring the Finance Committee up to date in terms of the cost from the feasibility study to the cost that's being put forth right now through the architect's proposal. And then lastly, I know that Sydney is here along with Jen and the Youth Commission, and they would be able to address some of the reasons that have been circulating as to, from a programmatic point of view, why they don't think the middle school lease building works.
All right, before you start that, can I make about a 2-minute statement?
Sure.
Great. I just want everybody here to understand that the Finance Committee and Town Meeting has supported the youth center from day one. I think there's been a lot of talk about the fact that that's not the case. I was on this committee 20 years ago or 18 years ago when the J.D. Antonio Youth Center was started. At that time, the discussion was nobody would come to the town for any money, it would be self-sufficient, and we said that'll be fine. A couple of years into the program, if I recall, there were some issues, and the United Way decided that they were going to pull their money out of that unless we reconstituted that organization. And I think at that time, myself and a bunch of other senior members, town officials sat at the police station, including Wally Seaver, and we reconstituted and came up with new bylaws for the youth center. At that time, they asked for the director's salary, and we said, fine, we'll do the director's salary. It was like $20,000 at the time. Over the years, this organization and town meeting has supported a number of issues that have come up with the youth center. We've never backed away from it. A couple of years ago, the youth center was in the hole $60,000, and this committee supported bailing that out and fixing the problems. We hired a consultant to come in and help understand what the problems were, and sat down after that report with a committee significant a number of times to come up with solutions and help the youth center progress. They've done a great job, and we've said that continuously over the last 3 years. I'm very pleased of the work they've done, and I know everybody on this committee is. So I just want everybody to understand that this committee has never backed away from supporting that organization. When you came to us in last spring and asked for money to look at that, we said we would do that. We even put away $900,000 in an account to do that. At that time, you told us it was $2.3 million, and we thought $900,000 was a good investment, and now we're hearing different. So we all will be interested to hear what the issues are and how we got to where we are. I just needed to let everybody know where this committee came from.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Mr. Chairman, and, you know, certainly there's no disagreement with much of what you said from the Youth Commission and the body that's before you right now. In fact, I'm going to be able to cite some of the positive votes that the Finance Committee did in fact make on behalf of the Youth Center. But, you know, as I was getting prepared tonight and I started to review the files, I found that the Youth Center opened its doors to the public in September of 1997. And at that time, it was under a lease agreement, kind of a rental arrangement with the National Guard, if you all recall. They used a portion of the building, but the National Guard ultimately controlled it, and we were subject to their, I guess, desires or whims as to what could be used. It existed that way for quite some time through the reorganization that you cited, of which I was a part of, and I know John Seaver, who was on the Board of Selectmen at that time, was also a part of, and the Board of Selectmen also adopted a set of guidelines for the new Youth Commission to go forward. And I think they have done that quite successfully since that time. Around 2004, the discussion came down from the state that the National Guard did not want to use the building anymore and were looking to turn it over to the town. We had a number of discussions through then State Representative Marie Parenti and also various town officials. What the Board of Selectmen decided to do was have a preliminary investigation done of the property, which was done in 2005. And I think all of you might recall seeing that report. It was done primarily by our building officials, engineering department, fire department, and they did an inspection of the building at that time I won't call it an extensive investigation, but it certainly was an inspection as to what the condition of the property was at that time. And that report indicated that the building would require between $1 million and $1.7 million in renovations going forward. The state, as you know, was offering the building to the town of Milford for $1. The Board of Selectmen, with your cooperation as well, also retained NSTRAT, an environmental firm, to do a 21E report. The FinCom actually appropriated $20,000 for that through its emergency fund in 2005. That report came back, for lack of a better term, clean. From that point, the Finance Committee on May 17th, 2006, voted 11-1 in favor of Article 32 for the upcoming town meeting to acquire the armory from the state for the town of Milford. At the June 2006 annual town meeting, that article passed unanimously. And also, the next article was $50,000, which this board also voted in favor of, to fund a feasibility study going forward, because that was always the intention, that was always the knowledge that this building needed to be renovated and needed to be upgraded. In 2007, the town received the deed from the state, and that's a significant event because, number one, there's a restriction in the deed that the property always needs to be used for municipal or public purpose. If not, it reverts back to the state at the state's desire. Also, and something that I don't know that a lot of people were aware of at the time, it qualified for the National Historic Register. So we also needed approval from the Mass Historical Commission. And they did that. But there's also restrictions from the Mass Historical Commission. Number one, that it be utilized as a youth center. And number two, that the town engage rehabilitation and activities and upgrades as funds may become available to further the renovation of the youth center. So those are the guidelines that we've been operating under since 2007. And again, I think the town prepared itself well before taking on this building. In 2007, also, the Armory Renovation Committee, which I think was constituted maybe about a year or so prior, maybe it was in that time, retained the architectural firm of Bogman Henry to do an initial feasibility study. And that report ran from 2007, I think, to about 2009, and I'm sure all of you were provided with that report. And that indicated various costs and upgrades from one plan that was about $4.5 million to a lower plan which was about $2.4 million. Again, based on 2009 dollars. It's significant to note that that was a feasibility study. It was not the in-depth investigation that this firm has gone through, and we'll get into that in a moment. The town then, as I'm sure you remember, went through the borrowing moratorium, and a lot of capital projects were put on hold. There were, in fact, other capital projects that the town did in front of this. There was the high school parking lot, there was the field project, and a few other projects. During that time period, the youth center existed, and I think existed very well, basically soliciting donations, contributions for things like a brand new furnace, windows that were put forth by the Consigli Construction Company. All of the work that was done there was garnered by the Youth Commission and outside sources. The town really didn't put a dollar in that building at all. I think what brought this particular issue to a head is the deterioration in the building was just becoming so great. The water infiltration into the building made it clear that we can no longer operate with the building as structured. And John Erickson, our building inspector, on March 11th, 2013, evaluated the building, did a report on it, and I think all of you remember that report basically called for comprehensive renovation, starting from the roof down. At the 2013 annual town meeting, this body, actually on April 10th, 2013, by a vote of 10-1, voted in favor of an article of $300,000 for design plans and specifications. And the language that you put forth in the report to the town meeting, I think, is significant. And if I look at that language, the members discussed that this was a vote that inherently was leading to a multi-million vote in the fall to renovate the youth center, as it would make no sense to spend $300,000 on a study and then not use it. No firm figures are available, but the discussion indicated that it would be at least $2 million. The FinCom expressed support but concern that with the Woodland School project costs unknown, this may be the last non-emergency project for a couple of years that can fit the debt schedule without removing some of the areas the committee seeks to protect in taxpayer relief. So again, that was always the impression going forward. That's always the direction that the town has taken and that the Armory Renovation Committee has taken. In the fall of 2013, the Armory Renovation Committee retained the services of OMR architects to start in on those design plans. And to my right, we have Marty Kretsch and Marcello Arjona, who have been the lead architects on this throughout the process. And the committee's been working very, very diligently. The architects have been working very, very diligently and quickly to bring us to this point today. As you stated, Mr. Chairman, last fall town meeting, knowing that this day was going to come as in terms of eventual renovation, the FinCom segregated $900,000 in its capital fund account that was put forward. I would also like to add that the Youth Commission and the Armory Renovation Commission has not been stagnant in terms of trying to locate alternative funding. In 2009, when the economic stimulus money was available through the federal government, we submitted this project. And we looked for essentially $3 million to get it done. Obviously, we did not get funded. The Youth Commission put together, I thought, a very impressive and comprehensive grant application to the Department of Energy Services in 2009 for $1.2 million, basically to do over the roof, energy efficient windows, other components that were going to make the building energy efficient. They had the services of Consigli Construction, which did a great job on the grant application. It's one of the best I've ever seen. Unfortunately, it was not funded. And as you're aware, the United Way contributes about $50,000 a year towards the operational cost, and the rest, basically, the Youth Commission raises, and that's how they operate and run their programs. So that, Mr. Chairman, is a little bit of background and the history of bringing us to where we're at. But, you know, there's one other point that I'd just like everyone to consider, because I think it's gotten lost in the shuffle as to just what this building was. And it was brought to me by a resident. I didn't even know that this existed, but it's a book, a portion of a book about armories. And it cites armories in Norwood, Westfield, Quincy, and Milford is listed. And there's a very impressive history of what this building has meant to the town of Milford. It dates back to the founding of a company of infantry, June 20th, 1794. That military unit was the unit that went forward, the Company C, 181st Infantry, was the unit that went forth when this building was built in 1911. And when you think about some of the names of the soldiers that went past through that building onto the various wars to serve our country, it's impressive. You see names like Consigli, Di Pasquale, DeVito, Ferrario, Pilla, Rizzoli, Testa. It really is Birmingham, Blasio, Gelli, Bazazzi. It really is the embodiment of what this community has done, I think, for this country. And the building, again, was built in 1911 with Milford pink granite. It's 8-inch thick block granite. It's not going anywhere. It's a very impressive structure, but right now we need to upgrade it. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that, and with that, I would ask that the architects be able to put forth their presentation.
save all the questions to Leanne, Brian.
Okay.
Hello everybody, my name is Marcelo Arjona. I'm the project manager with OMR Architects. And what we are going to show to you tonight is a summary of the work that we've been doing since late October last year to now on the project. But before we get into the details of our investigations and our design that we're proposing for the project, I wanted to share with you some of the initial impressions that we as architects had when we first started the project, and how we saw the building from the outside, just from a regular pedestrian viewpoint. And some of the things that struck us pretty deep is some of the things that actually Brian was referring to, which is first the context. It's like when you go to a real estate agent, they always tell you about location, right? And the first thing we saw is that this building and its relationship to the center of the town is not only ideal per se, but ideal for a public use, and that was pretty evident. And also, to the right on the slide that you see there, one of the things that are very imposing in this building is both its symmetry and its materiality. A building made out of granite, so solid and so symmetric, is something that is definitely imposing, and it's a building that we don't get to work on every day because there's not that many of them. So we thought that really make this building a treasure of the town, and we were very excited about it. And as we went inside the building on the briefing and the subsequent visits that we did to the building, we also learned, like on the lower left picture, we learned how the community had embraced this building, and especially the children, looking at even the main stair, how it has been painted with children's books titles, which we always start and end our presentations with. So overall, we think that we thought that this building had incredible architectural features, but we also, just by going inside the building, like anybody that does it will attest, it's evident that there's signs of heavy deterioration. And as soon as we saw that, we put together a work plan that would help us first understand what those problems were, because especially on buildings that are as old as this one, a century old, you will never be able to get our arms around every problem because it's very difficult. But you need to learn everything before you start actually proposing design. So the first thing we did is we subdivided our work into 3 phases. The first phase, which we call the pre-design phase, is a phase where we intended to get our arms around all the facts, or as many as we could. Did a lot of studies that I'm going to get into shortly, to really know what the problems that are just visually apparent, what those are and what is causing them, but also how deep they go. The second phase is specifically a design phase. Phase where we develop some options that we put together before the committee to select which one would better address the goals of the project and the goals of the youth center and how the building is used. And we started the design of our construction documents to get to a point where we really could match what we had learned and we were learning with what we wanted to do. And lastly, the last phase is the construction documents phase. That's the phase that we're in. That phase started about January, February, and it's intended to go until midsummer. We are currently at 90% of this phase, and that's the work that we've done so far. So it is not a typical breakdown of an architectural project, but it's appropriate for a not typical building as well. So let's go over that first phase that I just talked about and what we started doing. And as I said, what we did is really try to get as much information or learn as much information about the building as possible. So basically, I'm going to take you from the outside and into the building sequentially. And the first thing we started, because one of the things that we learned very quickly is that there was no graphic information on the building whatsoever. There was no drawings, there was no site survey, there were not geotechnical studies. So we basically started every documentation from scratch. The first one we did is we commissioned a full site survey to Niche Engineering, which is reputable civil engineering firm in the Northeast. And they developed a full survey showing the geometry of the site, the geometry of the building. They confirmed the utilities that the building is and the site are served by. And they helped identify all the features of the property. Now, with each one of these studies, one of the constants that you're gonna see is there's always good news and bad news and just about everything. So we took always the good news and tried to see how we could use that to enhance the project. And we also developed strategies to try to deal with the bad news. Once we had the overall information on the site and the building, and even the building the elevations on the floor plans inside the building, we also commissioned, I'm gonna jump to the bottom of the slide first. We needed to know from those utilities that the survey confirmed we had, we needed to know whether there was problems with any of them. Specifically the sewer system and the storm drain system. So we also, our plumbing engineers supervised a study and put a camera inspection through the sewer line and through the storm system. And the good news on that was that we identified that the sewer system was capable of dealing with the project moving forward, was in good shape, and was serviceable. The bad news came on the storm system. I'm gonna show you some images shortly, but basically what we couldn't put the camera through all those connectors and the pipes because they were completely blocked by trash and debris, and they show standing water, which is a sign that the water that's coming from this large roof is really not going anywhere, it's not being evacuated, and we have, that was confirmation of that. So that was a red flag that we needed to follow up with. And we also developed a geotechnical explorations report. We hired a company called Ecocomp to do that. And on the slide, you see the 4 green dots are the locations where they drilled some borings to identify what the site is composed of, which it came out as very heavy, dense silt on top of just sheer granite rock, which the granite rock was identified at a shallow area in front of the building by Pearl Street, pretty much basically under the slab on the basement, which tells us why maybe they dug the hole, got the rock and started from there. There was no point in digging further, we think. But that also established the elevation of the first level of the building relative to the street, which is higher by about 4 to 5 feet, depending on where you measure it from, which also makes the building in current codes not handicap accessible. So we're gonna get into that also shortly. And the other thing about the geology of the property is that the rock that is very shallow, about 12 feet below the surface on the front, it gets deeper on the back. So, and the water, we understand the underground water flows on the southeast direction. So there's something about the rock and the silts that are on top of it that makes the site very poor in terms of drainage. So that's one of the problems that also helps on the water that the building experiences. So that's to get our arms around the site. But then we looked at the inside of the building, and we know that there's a youth center dealing with children. But any building of this age, it would not be surprising to us to find hazardous materials, like any building before the 60s or 70s would have. So we commissioned a group of specialists, CDW, to go in the building, collect samples, and test it in a laboratory to identify whether that was the case. I think they took about 70 samples throughout the building. We did cuts on the roof. They took samples of that. They went around the exterior of the building. They went inside in the classrooms. They went in the gym. And there was no surprise that they actually found asbestos-containing materials, especially in some of the caulking joints in the exterior of the building, but also on the tile of the bathrooms. Some of that old tile has asbestos in it. But in addition to that, they also found lead-based paint in several of the classrooms, which if you tour the the building, some of these walls have deteriorated because of water entrainment and have these pieces of it that fall constantly. So that's something that definitely needs attention as soon as possible. And they provided a report. The town has a copy of it. They identified the amount of materials that they think are going to be required to be abated, and that is part of the budget that we are including for this project. Now, the other thing that we saw, even though it was not apparent, we know that the building, the granite itself is in remarkable good shape. There's no settling identified in the actual masonry. And that is in part to one of the reasons is because the soil configuration is so solid. The building really hasn't moved over the years because it's not going anywhere, and it's not going to go anywhere. However, the mortar joints of this masonry construction were intended to have a specific type of mortar with specific beaded front that helps the water go down without getting into those joints between each one of the pieces of granite. Over the years, this has deteriorated, and we found out because in order to understand all the envelope of the building, both the roof, the exterior of the building, and its openings, we thought we would commission a group of building scientists to come and inspect the building and really tell us everything they saw that was problematic about the building. We knew the visual parts we could identify, but there's a lot of testing that they did, and they inspected the entire building, produced a very detailed report. And one of the findings was that in the granite. I'm going to show you some examples coming up. But basically, this gave us a lot of information that was the basis of some of the approaches to the documentation that we developed and are developing. And lastly, as I said before, there was no information on the building in terms of drawings or of any kind that we could start from. So we had to put them together ourselves. So we came with a team from our firm, and we measured the entire building and created not only plans, but we created a three-dimensional model of the building that we used to extract views from. That's the technology that we work on our projects. So you see a sample there of the 3D model that we created and the plans that we extract from both the existing conditions and also the construction documents that we're developing right now. So overall, this section, I think, tells you is that on that first part of our work plan, we really focus on really trying to understand all of these problems. And then once we learned that, we started getting into why some of these things are happening. So I'm going to get you through the outside of the building first, and then I'll take you through each one of the levels, and we'll touch on some of the information that came from those studies. The first slide here for the existing conditions, it takes you around the building and shows you some of the specific, easily identifiable problems that the building is experiencing. From simple settling of the parking lot around it. These fire escapes, for example, were introduced into the building a couple of decades ago. They were not original. And if you see on the top left picture, the concrete base that this escape is intended to be supported on is basically floating in space. So that means that that's obviously not the intended approach, and this is a structure that people need to use under an emergency. So things like that are evident around the old escapes. Also, some of the existing features of the building, like the old ramp that used to bring equipment into the mess hall through the side walls of that ramp are experiencing deterioration and collapse in some of these portions that you see there. The next step, obviously, as water gets under the underside of that slab, is going to start eroding the base of that ramp. So this is only going to get worse if you don't actually stop the water from getting in there. On the bottom of the slide, you see other type of problems that we identified that over the years, for example, the back of the building has a lower roof that used to have 3 downspouts that collect the water from the roof and bring it, and used to bring it down to 3 receptors that are still visible there. Well, the downspouts are gone. You see the staining on the building basically shows how when all the water comes from that roof, it's not being directed to a storm system. It's basically flowing through the front of the wall, and we have found in many places that because of some of the problems on the top of the wall, the water is going on the inside face of the exterior wall, creating problems of many of different nature that we're gonna show you examples of too. So this is a big concern, and the lack of these accessories also helped compile debris and trash inside the receptors. So that blocked the entire system moving forward, which is something that I touched on earlier. So it's kind of a snowball effect where some of the problems actually help the other problems develop. On this slide, the other easily visual problem that we saw with settlement is that even in the front steps, which is the main entrance of the building, sometimes when they open those doors for the kids to enter, you see how the front steps have collapsed. The tongue of the top landing has settled to a point where there is a ridge there that is even a tripping hazard in the entrance that we think is not only not handicap accessible, like I said before, but is dangerous just for regular able people, especially for children to go through. Other examples of the outside of the building and the same problem that we saw is the fact that some of the areaways around the building are fully filled with debris and trash, and there's no, all that water that comes there is basically entering through the lower doors into the basement. You see how over the years some of these doors have been actually fixed temporarily with some membrane flashing on the bottom of the door to try to stop the water from entering, but that obviously is not a solution. But other than that, not only the downspouts on the back of the building are lacking, but some of the gutter systems and the downspout on the side of the gym building, like in this case, have been impacted, probably damaged by impact or deteriorated to a point that they're basically useless. You see in this portion, and I'm going to show you a view from above of this. Not only is not conducting the water to the downspout to try to get it out of the site, it's just keeping it there, and the water is going either on the front of the door or on the back on the front of the wall or the back of the wall. And that is the same consistent pattern of water problems that we identify in this building. I talked about how these the several of these receptors of the exterior downspouts are completely blocked, and even the decorative moldings of the original building are deteriorated to a point that some of the pieces have fallen and they are rusted away in very deteriorated condition. So that's to give you a picture of what we found on the general site review. But now we went to the roof. On the report, on the envelope report that we developed, the team of building scientists reviewed the roof that exists there, reviewed the cuts that we did to the roof, and they also were able to identify a marking on the roof that showed us that the warranty of the roof expired in 2003. So it's a roof that is well over its expected use, or the life expectancy. But not only that, but they helped us identify that in many locations, and this is a little too small to see, in many locations there's impact damage on the head house roof, which is the white roof that you see here. There is existing chimneys that basically don't have any coping. So basically the water is going straight into the building. We know that the fireplaces have been blocked from the inside. So that water standing there is going somewhere, but it's not going outside the building. So that's clearly a big concern of what that water is doing when it goes into the building. But the roof itself is not only damaged by impact in many locations, but it's filled with debris on the canisters around the 3 roof drains that exist. And some of the flashing accessories that go around the building at the parapet of that castellated shape that you see from the outside, that were intended to basically keep the water that flows down staying outside the building. You see how it has completely separated from the wall. And there's examples on the flat roof over the head house, but also on the back, on the gym. you're gonna see in a second. So basically, the water that's intended to go outside these flashing and be collected in the drains is going inside these holes and straight on the rear side of the exterior wall. This is other views of that flashing, and you see how it's completely separated in some areas. This is the place where the big vaulted roof on the gym connects to the house and the chimney that exists there. And you see how the membrane of this roofing, even though it is in much better shape than the other one, but when it connects to the gutters, you see how the membrane is intended to go into the gutter and protect, to make sure that the water stays there. And in some places, like here, has completely been ripped out and fallen. And the flashing below the gutter, again, is directing water, really, is completely separated. It's not keeping the water. The water that's stagnated there, it ends up coming on the front of the exterior wall. And over the years, you see here a view from the from the top roof of that same gutter that's damaged by impact. You see how there's standing water right there, which is what I was referring to. But over the years, also, multiple repairs have been attempted, which are really, you don't need to be a professional roofer to know that it's not technically appropriate. And not only that applies to some of the roofing joints, but it applies to the masonry as well. One of the big ticket items that the WJE identified for us is the condition of the granite masonry wall. They were also pleased to know that there's just a couple of cracks in a couple of units around the building, but in general, all the slabs and the blocks are in very good shape. What is really deteriorated and in very bad shape is, as I said, the mortar joints between the blocks. And over the years, you see in this picture, in some areas, some movement have reopened some of the repairs that have been attempted because they were made with inappropriate materials. A proper repair should not be done with elastomeric caulking like they did here. And not only that, but it's not deep enough. So in some cases, what they found is that some of the repairs are basically allowing the water to get behind the blocks and staying there because it's difficult to get out. And when that water freezes and thaws with the weather, basically it keeps breaking up and deteriorating the mortar, and that is actually throughout the building. So this is something that at first blush we saw the building, you just don't notice. But once you start getting into it, you see that the extent of all these problems also allows water to get through the joints between those granite slabs into the building as well. So we have water coming from the top, from damage on the roof and the roof accessories. We have water coming through the wall because the gutters are not taking that water out. And we have water getting through the wall because the mortar joints are not properly solved. They recommended that a full repointed is required and recommended for the entire building. And so we have that as part of our project. All these materials are going to be removed to a depth of about 4 inches to have a full depth painting of the entire building. In addition to that, the other things that they saw as reviewing the envelope was all the openings, doors and windows, and what was happening with that. As Brian said before, I believe there was a donation of new windows in recent years that were installed in the building. But one of the things that is easy to identify, and we have some more pictures on the inside too, is that these windows were simply placed on the old frames. So basically what was done was remove the old sashes and install new windows into frames that were already very, very deteriorated and inappropriate in terms of their joint with masonry on the outside and with the furring of the inside of the walls. So what we have here is a window that in and of itself is fine, attached to the building through a very inappropriate joint. They recommended in the report that all the buildings be removed entirely and done again. We, the team, we thought that we should try to save these windows because it was an important donation to the town. And so our documents now are basically asking the future contractor to remove carefully these windows, store them, remove all the frames that are inappropriate, do a new frame and put them back so we can at least save that. And our estimate still indicates that that is also more cost effective. So we're trying to develop strategies to maintain some of the things that the town has done over the years, while solving the water problem. That if you see, water that runs through the wall, gets through the joints of the windows and the doors, just like in this case. This door has also been attempted to be remediated with some membrane flashing. But as Sidney probably would attest, and I saw a video that he took in some of those heavy storms, the water basically rolls down and comes in buckets from the top of the door and the bottom of the door, creating problems in the gym floor that we're gonna see in a second. So that's part of this envelope report that was developed was critical for us to understand how extensive the skin of the building needed to be treated, and all these conditions need to be resolved. That's something that nobody would see at first sight. Now let's go on the inside of the building, and just to wrap up this issue with the windows, I have these pictures of the current state of some of these windows on the inside of the building. You see how, as I mentioned, the existing wood frame is completely broken in many places, deteriorated by water entrainment. Some of the trim is completely gone. You see the exterior wall there, and the gap between the inside finishes and the exterior wall completely open. So there's no, in terms of energy efficiency or waterproofing, this is not performing at all. But not only that, the fact that all these pieces have come apart, have make the insulation, which you see in some of these views, just basically start falling out of the holes. I mean, we all know that being in contact with insulation or breathing these pieces that come out of insulation is a concern for us. And this is part of what we are basically attacking as what the window scope will include. Now, just to go back to something that I mentioned before, the building, because of its configuration and its construction, is not handicap accessible. And when you look at the codes, when you undertake a project that usually the cost of which it supersedes 30% of the stated value of the project, the code requires you to make the building fully accessible. What that means, it means that not only handicapped people should be able to get into the building and travel the building, but all the plumbing fixture and the arrangement of the layout of the bathrooms have to be modified to make them accessible. The hardware of the doors have to be adjusted to make it accessible. The railings and some of the original railings that I know that the town loves and we are really working hard to preserve have to be accessible. In this case, this is the main monumental stair. You see how this railing doesn't have the proper height that's required by code, doesn't have the structural stability that's required by code. So our project is intending to preserve some of the key historical pieces of the building while upgrading them as needed to comply with the code. And this is all triggered by the size of the scope of the project. When you start with the roofing of this size, the envelope problems, the window, you are well above the threshold. So our project is assuming the need to attack all these to make the building compliant. And we're going to show you in a few moments some of the strategies for that. Now I'm going to take you briefly from the basement, main level, and top level to see the deterioration that I've mentioned before. How the water coming from the rear side of the exterior wall basically has deteriorated the finishes on the inside of the building to a point that they've basically fallen apart. You see this is a ceiling in one of the rooms that's, I believe this is in the old kitchen. And not only that, but the water, and you see the staining here. The water still comes into the building from multiple sources, as I said. We are trying to address as best we can all the things that we can see, and that's part of our project, all the roof problems and so forth, to make sure that all the water that is now getting into the building, we can take out as is required. Now, one of the things that we saw on the building that really caught our attention and we wanted to know more about is how when you walk in some areas of the building, there are areas of the floor that have deflected substantially. In a building of this age, we really needed to know why, because that was not a good sign for us. So our structural engineer specified some destructive observations needed to be done around all the building, and I think we we did about 12 to 15 openings throughout. We hired a carpenter, and this is another of the investigations we did. This is an example in one of the corners of the building when he started taking pieces out of the floor and got down to expose the structural frame. Interestingly, one of the reasons why we selected some of these areas were because not only the floor was deflecting, but the walls, like in this green wall in this picture, noticeably have sunken, especially toward the corners, in some cases 2 to 3 inches. So that was something that we didn't like. We needed to understand why. And you see how in this case it even pulled the ceiling down, and the moldings are all deflecting down along with water damage. And we found why. The rationale is because all that water that I've been talking about that comes from the rear of the wall, it's been landing in perimeter beams, wood beams, just like this one that you see here. There's supposed to be another one there, but has completely disintegrated and rotted away with the water that has coming on the interior side of the exterior wall, to a point that only 30-40% of the and a rotted 30% remains. And of course, without that support, the wall by its own weight is pushing down and pulling the ceiling from it. So this is on structural deficiencies of age and water entrainment that need to be addressed immediately. So it is a big part of the scope of work that we have identified. And this is not isolated. We wish it was isolated, but if you go around the building, it happens especially in the corners, especially on the long span and the head house, and right immediately next to the doors and the gym, which is where all that water is coming right through the threshold of the door. Another example of that is in the gym. Like I'm saying, this is a hole that existed actually before inspections. We didn't do this one, but it was quite handy that it was there. But it's right in front of one of the escape doors. So basically right now, Cine has it covered with a piece of plywood, but it's obviously not what you want to have in front of an escape route. And we looked that all the water has also rotted away the subflooring, and some of these members, the ends of those framing members has also been deteriorated substantially. That will require adding new members next to them and fixing that. So the scope of our project includes that. And you see, this is an example of the state of this repair that some of these flooring has experienced. But in addition to that, to the structural nature, which is something that concerns us a lot, just the finishes of the old flooring of the mess hall, just by its age and because of the movement of the floor is fairly uneven, are splintering away, creating not only points of collecting debris and further deterioration, but really we think a safety hazard. I mean, if you were running, especially playing sports, and fall into one of those shards of wood, that I think was we think it's an accident waiting to happen, especially with all those kids around. And now we're going to the top floor. A similar condition could be found everywhere where we saw the ceiling being pulled down by a wall. We saw that, for example, look at this. This wall in this corner has deflected to a point about 2 inches from the other one. This building, which is an enlarged view of this corner, should be here. And this is all because of that same problem. So we don't think that we nail down all the locations that are problematic, but we know that there are more than we saw. So we have accounted with an allowance for that, which in a building of this age and project of this nature is totally common. And it's the right way to approach it. Another example, only this one, the walls were not able to pull the ceiling down, so it's completely removed from the ceiling, exposing this crack there. Evidence of water damage throughout the ceiling of the top level are basically, in some cases also, pieces of the ceiling are falling down. The picture on the right is a picture where what we call the interstitial space, which is a space that exists between the underside of the roof deck, which is a wood roof deck, and on the upper side of the ceiling on the top level. It's a little, not as tall as this table, but a person fit through it, so we sent one in. And just like in any of the other inspections, there were good news and bad news. And this one, the good news is that the person came out alive, and so we were relieved about that.
Get the contract out.
But he found 12 other people in there that didn't.
The bad news, obviously, is that the signs of deterioration by water damage are everywhere. You see, all this staining is all the water that's coming through all the perforations in the roof, through all the damage on the flashing that I showed before. And not only that, but the ceiling itself is supported from, is basically hung from the structure of the deck by small 2x6 pieces of wood, about 100 years old. Some of them have like one nail left. So our scope of work also adds about, I want to say, 160, or well, a couple now, about 160 more to really make sure that that ceiling is going to stay in place, because right now it's a concern of ours. So, so that's what pertains to the wood structure. There's also something interesting that we found in this inspection, which is the two turrets that you see in the front of the building. Well, they go all the way around, but on the back of the building, they're not supported by wood, obviously, because they're very heavy walls. There is a steel assembly that was originally designed there to support that was not properly designed from the structural point of view. So our structural engineers went and took a look, dimensioned all the members, and determined that that is not sufficient. And that is one of the reasons why the back of the turrets, if you go there and look at it, have deflected and moved back by their own weight, creating a crack right down the middle. So it's unrealistic to think that we're going to push them back. What we want to do is address that assembly to make sure that they stay where they are, and then with the repointing work that we are proposing, address the cracks that were developed and fix that. So that's something that is not that's inherent to the original design of the building and not damaged over the years. And so I'm going to take you briefly through the approach to our proposed renovation. All these issues that we have highlighted in very general terms are the basis of most of the scope of work for our document. So the first part that we call it building stabilization, because one thing that is evident is the building is not stable on the inside. It's very solid on the stone wall, but on the inside has a lot of problems. So the stabilization will include, and the scope of work will include, really putting the envelope back into the building. It's something that you don't see, but it's what's going to make this building be available for the future and for the youth center to advance renovating it over the years. So basically, some of the things that I wanted to highlight here is how we thought of a clever way to solve the accessibility issue. Since the building is about 4 to 5 feet at the main level above Pearl Street, right here on your right, one of the things, and on top of that, not only the front steps are collapsing themselves, but inside of the building there's another ramp, which is a little odd, but it's found sometimes in armories, which makes it even less accessible. The way we thought we could bring back the main entrance to the front of the building, which is the intended point of that symmetry in the architecture, was to take that archway that exists there and basically cut the sill down a few feet more, so that from the street, if you're in a wheelchair, you could just come gently on a walkway to an entry plaza that enters straight at level into the building. That way, from there, you can either go up the steps if you're an able person, but if you're in a wheelchair or you're incapacitated, you can just go through a double-sided elevator that takes you from this level right here to the main level of the main lobby of the building. So everybody has equal access to the building. And in addition to that, in terms of accessibility, we were also required to add a handicap lift to make sure that handicapped people can also enjoy the stage and be part of presentation, which is something that the building doesn't allow at the moment. So what we did is we try to focus beyond repairing and doing all these stabilization endeavors to really clear the main level of the building to be really what the youth center wanted to be, and take advantage of all we're doing to make it work, to add, for example, accessible bathrooms on each level. In this level, they are located in the corner. To add a new enclosed egress stair to be able to, on the fire, egress from the top level and from this level. And renovate, as I said, all the railings of the main historical stair, and remove all and adjust and repair all the floor of the gym, which is in such a bad condition and in dangerous condition, to give the youth center a way to get more revenue and to make it a clear, open plan concept that they can, into the future, advance further. On the other levels, the scope is quite minimum because of budget considerations. So basically, this is a picture of the basement where we have obviously the elevator that comes down. It has to go down there for accessibility, and a battery of bathrooms that's going to help us provide the fixture that the amount of fixtures that the building under full occupancy or under an event is going to require for a substantial amount of people. And on the top level, again, the elevator and the stair are part of the big parts of the scope. But in this corner, which is one of the big areas that we having to remove the floor and repair it because of the beams that I showed you a picture of before, we are taking advantage of that and putting new restrooms also on that level that are fully accessible. So in the future, once now the structural deficiencies are taken care of and the accessibility is granted for everybody in the building, then the youth center can take each one of these rooms and move forward with additional partial renovations. This is a view of the exterior facade in Pearl Street, and just to illustrate what I mentioned before, how instead of keeping the current door about at this level, what we're doing is removing those wood doors and dropping the entrance a few feet, so that now we have a grand entrance room with keeping the archway that exists there, and it's gentle enough to go from one side to the main entry on a wheelchair without railings or any exterior structures that you see in buildings sometimes. So it gives a sense of grand entrance without doing something grand, because the building is what's grand about it. This illustrates also the repointing scope that we have and how we're going to address all the openings, windows, and the roofing as part of the overall project. Lastly, this is a sample of some of the depth of construction documents that we've gotten into. This shows you how we have to specifically address the parapet conditions and go over each one of the recommendations of those studies to make sure that the water is not going to flow on the inside of the building on through or into that space there, but it's really going to flow away and to the drain. So that this is an example of a lot of the things that we've been developing. And similarly, on the main stair, which I think is fantastic and has all the paintings that the kids have done over the years, how to address all these railings in a way that maintains the historical nature of them, but gives them structural stability and the right height and the right handrail accessories to make it accessible and comply with the code. So that overall is a quick sample of how we're taking all this information that is technical in nature and trying to make the best of it and incorporate it into what could be a great start for a youth center for the future. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Marty to talk a little bit about the numbers and budget.
I assume we'll get into a Q&A session later on, so I can just go briefly into this last part of my presentation. And unless there are any immediate questions about what Marcelo was talking about. What's going on here? Why is this not? Oh. At each stage of the project that Marcelo mentioned, we did a cost analysis. We actually did a cost analysis of this even before we started design to get a feeling of where we were. And so the most recent cost analysis is actually a cost estimate based on the 90% documents. So we're really basing this on pretty much complete information about what we know about this, what we're going to do for the building. And this cost estimate says that the construction cost is going to be somewhere around 61,000 in terms of construction cost. That, by the way, equates to about $127.56 per square foot throughout the whole building. It's about 33,000 square feet. Again, we're just showing a front page here, a very detailed cost estimate. Again, taking the organization that Marcelo used to break that 4.26 million down, we're really talking about three basic components. The first is what we're calling the building stabilization. I guess it's keeping the water out and keeping the building standing up. So all those structural repairs, the roofing, the masonry that Marcelo talked about. Out of the 4.26 million, that adds up to about $1.5 million. The next component is what we call the code compliance, and the biggest part of that is all the ADA stuff. You know, the entrance, the elevator, the fire stairs. The other thing the building needs is a sprinkler system, which it doesn't have right now. So that equates to about $2.33 million. And the final is what really is just making the building functional. When you saw those holes in the gym floor, we really have to make the building, you know, workable, usable. So that's really the flooring, the lighting, and things of that in the gym itself. And that's a relatively small part of the number. I mean, the big numbers are really items 1 and 2. So those 3 components basically, again, stabilization, code, and functionality. You can also think of this as all dealing with safety, because really, all these things really deal with safety. The functionality, I mean, when you see those holes in the floor in the gym, you really have to, if you're gonna go to all this other things and deal with the code stuff, you really gotta make that space functional. So again, that roughly adds up to the $4.26 million. And then there's soft costs, which again, you have the fees, and other things related to the construction administration stage. And then for a project like this, which is an existing historic building, you do have to have a contingency. You're gonna, despite all the work we've done, there are gonna be hidden conditions that you're gonna have for a project. So the $4.26 million in terms of a hard construction cost equates to something around between $5 million and $5.1 million. And that's kind of where I think that's what the article for the town meeting is suggesting that's the amount we're gonna need. We did an exercise, this is not overly scientific, but if you were gonna try to replicate this building from scratch and build a new building with this kind of architecture and the granite veneer, you'd be talking, instead of $127 a square foot, you'd be talking something like $360 a square foot. Again, we didn't do any design, but it's just kind of a rough comparison, and then again, you'd have to add soft costs to that number. So this building really is, in many ways, I mean, it's an asset that with in this day and age, a reasonable amount of money, you can actually bring it back to a situation where it's going to be very useful for many, many years. And that, I don't know, who's next? Brian,
I think what might make sense now is to allow Vonnie, she put together a memo, basically taking us from the Bogman-Henry report to the OMR report.
I only brought one, sorry. I'd be happy to email them out to the whole committee if you want to see it. The question has been asked, how did we go from $2 million to $5 million? And the answer is in the details. The devil is in the details in this particular case. The BHNA study that was done was a feasibility study. They did not do any physical testing. They didn't do roof cuts. They didn't do geotechnical testing. They didn't test for hazardous materials. And the study they did was good for what, you know, at the time, what the town wanted. The town wanted to get a general idea of what was needed to renovate the building, and they provided that. But as you can see, OMR has done some very, very extensive work, and they have unfortunately uncovered more problems than we were originally aware of. So there were, based on the 90% design estimate by OMR, I went and picked that apart and tried to compare apples to apples against the Bogman-Henry. And there were several items that were either underestimated or not included at all in the Bogman-Henry estimate that was, for construction, was $2 million roughly, but that did not include soft costs. They, in their report, specifically said there should be another $407,000 added to that construction number. So that brings us up to 2.4. Was what the real Bogman-Henry number was 2.4. The items that I identified that were not included at all were the installation of interior drains in the basement to help mitigate the flooding problem in the basement and get the water away from the walls. That's $56,000. Asbestos abatement was not identified. We have put a number of $30,000 on that. The exterior site improvements, as Marcelo explained, turned out to be kind of a big ticket item with the repointing and the new drainage structures. That's almost $300,000. And then the chairlift for the stage to comply with ADA compliance is $25,000. So there was over $400,000 worth of items that they had not identified that we did during the course of our study. Sorry, I misspoke. The $300,000 for the exterior site improvements was just for site work. In addition, they underestimated the exterior masonry work, which we show an increase of $486,000 to repoint the masonry work. They had a very, very low number in there. The replacement of both roofs is an increase, leads to an increase of $294,000. The structural repairs that had not been identified, what leads to an increase of $46,000. And then the sprinkler system they had a very small number in there for the sprinkler system as well. It's going to be another $181,000. So all of those numbers combined, we identified another $1.4 million worth of costs based on the work that we did that is necessary to bring the building into compliance and also to meet all the codes. In the Bargman-Henry report, they also were very specific about the fact that their numbers were based on 2009 numbers. And they suggested an 8% annual increase to adjust that up to any other future costs in the future. So using 8% for 5 years brings us to an escalation cost of an additional $1.1 million. So the original $200,000 for construction costs plus the original $2 million for construction costs plus $400,000 soft costs plus 1.42 of additional work identified plus 1.1 of escalation costs brings us up to $5 million. The current 90% design cost for construction is 4.26. The soft costs and the 10% contingency, as Omar explained, is about $800,000, and that brings us up to just over $5 million. So it's fairly comparable. The fact that we can explain why this estimate is much larger than the $2 million number that has been floating around. It's based on the fact that there's more work to be done and that there are escalation costs because 5 years have passed since that first estimate was done.
And then the only other thing, Mr. Chairman, before you'd like to take questions, and I know that middle school east has been a concern for many members. So Sydney, as the director, I think has given everyone a memo as to why the Youth Commission feels that that kind of a building just might not fit programmatically, even beyond all of the other issues. So you want to address that, Sydney? Sydney, I think you use a microphone.
Now, we took the time to walk through middle school east. At first, we don't even know what space is going to be offered to us, if any. The closest time would be, let's say, 2017, before the Milford Youth Center could even be inside that building. The programs that we hold now and the usage of the building would have to be put on hold. And ultimately, the last decision for that would be on the school committee and the Board of Selectmen to decide on. The safety issues that I saw walking through the building were multiple doors, a lot of exits for kids to be able to walk in, anybody else to allow other people to walk into the building without it being supervised. I see that as a big problem. The office space is located inside the locker rooms. And with that being said, the supervision wouldn't be as strong inside of a building like that. The classroom layouts are long hallways. I can't imagine having 400 kids running through those halls with the staffing that we have right now. The space that is there now would have to be reconfigured to be able for it to run as a youth center. Right now, there's a lot of walls. The building has its own issues that if and when is available, we will have to address those problems too. Just walking through the building, the walls are separating themselves. I see a lot of water damage, which are also, issues that we will have to face later down the road, if that is the option. The space, to the youth board, it just isn't right, just because the gym floor will be downsizing about 1,000 square feet. The ceiling is about, let's say, our ceiling at the youth center is about double the size, which allows us to play activities, kickball, volleyball. We throw the football in there. We have a lot of activities that we need that space to be able to function for our programs to be held there. The square footage of the piece that I'm looking at, like I said, I don't know exactly what is being put on the table here, but just the back end, the cafeteria and the gymnasium floor, it equals out to about 16,000 square feet, which is half of what we have right now. And with that right there, we'll take the Milford Youth Center programs and really cut them down to a fraction. We've worked pretty hard to get to the spot and position that we're in now to have to start cutting programs. And what is that going to do to our programs if we have to wait 2 to 3 years for a youth center to continue at another spot? The youth center depends a lot on our rentals. That's how we have our revenue. We make approximately about close to $19,000 in just rentals. We can't duplicate that in middle school east with batting cages, skate parks, boxing programs, weight facility, dance rooms. I just can't see how middle school east can really function as a youth center without money being dumped into it. I think as taxpayers, it sounds kind of foolish to drop more money to look at another project when we're sitting in the perfect building for the Milford Youth Center. I think these kids, they speak pretty loud. This is home for them, and for us to make a decision like that, and it's really going to affect the kids. What do we do with the armory if it doesn't pass? It'll become an eyesore to the town. It's perfectly across the street from the town hall. If you're standing at Tedeschi, you can see both buildings. It's a good representation for the town to have that building standing and not boarded up. I have a passion for that building, and it looks great across the town hall. The building's 103 years old. It's a historical building. The possible future use of the middle school east, again, will compromise future rentals for the town and surpluses and revenue. Don't know exactly what is offered or what is going to be offered, but it's extremely big. Long hallways. We don't have the staff to run something like a building of that size, and cutting our programs down to a fraction. Just don't think it's fair to the community and for the kids that are using it. The town has already invested $20,000, like Brian said on the 21E report, $45,000 for the feasibility study, $300,000 for the OMR architects. That's an investment that was made by the town, and to overlook that, we're just throwing money away. Middle school east is being used by the school. The 8th grade program, athletic program is being put together with the high school program. We get the overspillage of the program of sports that the high school does not have the space to occupy these programs. Those programs fall into the youth center, softball, wrestling, football practices, just to name a few of the programs that are coming through that our high school can't really provide. And if that space is taken away, where do these programs go? Our schools still need to use a gymnasium. Taking that away would create more issues for our school system. Excuse me. Like I said, the youth center depends a lot on our rentals. We've been blessed by the United Way to donate over $200,000. A lot of donations have been made, such as windows, boilers. Other community members have donated their time, have donated money. To overlook that, it'd be a smack in the face to the citizens of Milford. Again, our youth commission have put a numerous amount of hours in maintaining and keeping this place running properly. Thank you guys for working as hard as you do. And my staff, Jen Ward, Felipe Marquez, Allison Julian, and Corey Knopp. Pretty strong team in there, and we will work as hard as we need to work to continue to do what we're doing now with the success that we've had in the last couple of years. If you guys have any questions, we would like to keep the dream going.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just beg your indulgence, I know that John Seaver also wanted to address the board on this particular issue in terms of middle school east.
We normally don't, John, but since you're a former selectman and man about town and brother of the Lake Wally, we'll let it.
Well, I am on the renovation committee as well.
I don't care.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to add to what Sydney was saying about why middle school east is really not a good option for the youth center. So I just want to lay out 5 specific reasons. None of them on their own is overwhelming, but all 5 taken together clearly indicates to me, and I think others, that it's just not anywhere near as reasonable as renovating the Armory. The first is that the Milford School Department and Milford Community Use have said emphatically, Lenny Morcone, Richie P. Gustavo, and Nick Sakili, we've talked to them all, they all say they need east in their long-term plans. Even accounting for the fact that Woodland is going to have a new gym, they need east for their gym needs because there's been a chronic gym shortage in the town, and they're adding junior high sports this fall. So they all basketball, baseball, softball, and so forth are all new demands on gyms in Milford. So the schools need that. So if the youth center moves to east, it hurts the schools to some extent, and also community use. They have the same issues. The Armory is slightly more centrally located than Middle School East. And I'm talking the back portion of Middle School East, basically the gym and the cafeteria. The front classroom portion, I think the argument would be that would be used for a community college or some other privatized need. So we're talking about the lobby, the gym, and the cafeteria in the back only. The Armory is slightly more centrally located, it's freestanding, and it's slightly more visible. Middle School East, as I say, is attached, and so it could have potential conflicts, co-location conflicts with Quinsigamond Community College or whoever goes in there. I don't think it would be a good mix, kids running around in the back or entering, and then a college campus kind of atmosphere in the front. It just might not be, there might be some conflicts, and we may get, if we want to lease it out, we may take a hit on the revenue. Middle School East is 20,000 square feet, the gym, cafeteria, lobby, and locker rooms, which is what we're talking about. The Armory is 33,000 square feet. So we're moving into a 35% smaller location, 35% less, from 33,000 to 20,000, basically. Al, is got a question?
The whole middle school east is
No.
only 20,000?
The non-classroom portion.
Yeah.
That's all we're talking about. That's not gonna be where the youth center is, as far as I can see. So going down by 35%, you're gonna have to reduce some existing programs, and you don't have room for future growth. The fourth reason is, the Armory requires, as you now can see, the Armory requires work now. Where, and Middle School East will not be available for 3 years or so, who knows, 3 years plus. What do we do for 3 years? So the timing is a significant problem. And then finally, if you move the youth center to Middle School East, you create two problems. You've got the Armory now that's abandoned, and it may revert to the state. And the state didn't, the state doesn't want it. If it wanted it, it wouldn't have given it to us in the first place. So it's likely it'll sit there for decades and become like the old Stacy building was, or the old Granite School. We could have another big problem right in the center of our town with the Armory. And the second problem is, if you move there, you, again, could crowd out school needs and the Milford community use. So just those 5 reasons, all taken together, in my mind, indicate that the Armory is a far superior place for the Milford Youth Center.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for this opportunity for a lengthy presentation. I apologize.
so,
hanging on.
Brian, it needed a lengthy presentation.
I drove, so I gotta,
Absolutely. So,
if he doesn't wrap it up soon, I'm gonna leave.
I mean, I think you can see the level of work that the
I gotta go and
architects
take some
have done.
medication.
can we keep the noise down, please? I have a, you want to leave that on, Bonnie? Oh, I just want to, all right, okay, well, let me ask
I just didn't wanna bother you when
you, when did your name become Bonnie? All right. I have a gentleman. To the architects. I have the first question I have, and I didn't see it up there, is the project plan. What's the term of the project, start to finish? Shovel the dirt,
In terms of construction time, you mean?
all of it, fix it all, give you the $5 million tomorrow. When do you start? When is it done?
We have talked preliminary with the committee about going out to bid this summer, so the construction could start in the early fall, and we think the project would take somewhere a year or maybe a little less. So it's in terms of, that's a time frame. So sometime, think of September 2015, perhaps, as when the building could be occupied.
So a year and a half. Okay. Brian, you brought up that the building is qualified for the National Historic Society. Is it on the register?
No, it qualifies for it.
Okay, so it's not a historical building. in
It is a
terms of-
historical building.
Oh, but it's not on the register, so we can pretty much do whatever we want, correct?
No, that's not correct. And if you just bear with me for
I
a
can.
second, I'll get the operative documents. And this was all conditioned with the original transaction when the town obtained the building from the state for the $1. So there's a memorandum agreement among the Division of Capital Asset Management, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and the town of Milford regarding the Milford Armory. It's included in the Mass Historical Commission Inventory of Historic and Archaeological Assets of the Commonwealth, and in the opinion of the Mass Historical Commission, meets the criteria for listing in the National and State Register of Historic Places. So, if we were going to go forward, the stipulation is the town shall continue to use the Milford Armory to house its youth center and affiliated programming, and will engage in rehabilitation activities and upgrades sensitive to the historic character of the building as funding becomes available. Dated April 19th, 2007. So that's,
I didn't see that in the deed. So I
it's
must-
not part of the deed. It's not part of the deed. It's part of the transfer from the state, though. It's not recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
So, to that point then, when we do this renovation, do we have to do it with period stuff? Like the right mortar, the right boards, the right, to maintain the historical?
But we do have to consult with Historical Commission and make sure that, you know, they approve.
And if they want it done with period materials, then what?
I
I
can
mean, like, we couldn't
No.
do the windows in this building because it's on the registry and they said you can't replace the windows, you gotta use the existing windows.
Right, right, right.
So if we have to repoint the place and
Says the
replace
town
some.
shall submit for review and comment the proposed exterior renovation plans, elevations, and specifications in the event the town funds any portion of the rehabilitation project. So Marcello and Marty, you know, I know you've worked with the Mass Historical before, so, you know, what does that mean in real terms?
I think as part of our final wrap-up of the documents, which we'll be doing this summer, we should need to go through that process. But we're not doing anything to the I mean, everything that we're doing with the building is essentially repair and replacement and trying to keep what's existing and rehab it. So we're not going and trying to do anything particularly modern or other than just
No,
working the code.
I understand.
Yeah.
You understand my point?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
All right,
Not to answer your question
go
about the mortar, we do have in our studies scheduled for this last round of to wrapping up the documentation, a specific testing, a lab testing of the mortar with the expectation that that would help inform the specifications of the mortar required for the repointing process. Because one of the problems, and this is more technical than historical, if you repoint the granite with the wrong depth over the raw materials, you're just not fixing the problem. So it's more of a technical issue.
But the reason I'm going there, obviously, is what additional costs are we gonna see if we have to maintain the historical society's level of confidence that we're not, ruining their historical building?
Right, but don't lose sight of the breadth of the memorandum. The breadth of the memorandum clearly states that the town's use is for a youth center. And the
let's assume-
Historical Commission recognizes that, so they're not gonna be looking to put in the kinds of things that might be decorative and that type of stuff, as opposed to functionality.
I'm talking about construction, of the walls, the frame, the doors. You wanna move the door down, that's part of the thing. That's my, I think that's something that's important to find out, obviously, and put a cost on it. 5% more, 1% more, 3% more, or we can't do it. We need to, I think we all need to understand if that's a doable situation.
Just from the limited exposure that I've had to this thing, I would think that anything, if at all, would clearly be within the confines of the contingency money. There's no question.
Don't know.
There's no
Okay.
question.
Well, that's only a 90% estimate, right?
Well, they're at 90% work, which, generally is good to go to bid,
Yeah,
so
typically, yeah,
we're there.
That's typically.
We're there, this is what you have, and having been involved in other projects, I'm gonna tell you, the level of work that is done on this project, I
Oh,
haven't
it's
seen on any
extensive.
project.
No, it's very extensive. All right, one more or two more questions that I had, then I'll open it up to the group here. During the 12 to 18 months renovation, what do you do with the armory and what do you do with the kids?
Well,
They go.
Sydney has worked on kind of a Band-Aid approach to scale down some of the programs that the Youth Commission offers. splinter it off-site, work with, I don't know if it's private people, the school department, but, you know, they're basically looking to keep a skeleton operation ongoing to keep the youth center alive during the construction period.
Okay. I'm good.
Jim?
First of all, thank you for a clean, unemotional presentation.
That's good.
I mean, the last couple weeks, I've been flooded with people calling, dealing with the wrong issue in my mind, which was not, do we support the kids? Because that was dealt with 10 years ago. We've commended this board, because, I don't know, Mark, when was it, 10, 12 years ago, when we were asked to support the old charter that all Milford kids weren't welcome in the youth center, we said we couldn't, because this is supposed to be for all of our kids. And this board has done a wonderful job being inclusive and not putting labels on children. I mean, the emotional pieces had me totally stumped. Jen, in her quiet and unemotional way, probably took me more or farther towards being able to make a motion to support this by explaining Middle School East could be an option. If the Armory burnt down tomorrow, I don't believe we'd abandon the kids. We'd find a way, and if Middle School East was the only place, we'd do it. Saying, John, I love you, but telling me 50 yards makes it not centrally located, I don't buy it. I really don't. Okay? What Jen, if I heard it right, convinced me of is, even if we went and spent money, because gut feel, I don't know what the number would be, but it'd be a couple $1,000,000 renovating the small little skinny rooms into bigger skinny rooms. Even if we spent a couple $1,000,000 doing it, it still wouldn't fit the staffing needs, because we couldn't look at and manage the kids in long skinny areas. Some of the emotion today, I'm listening to the radio and I'm hearing they're gonna condemn the youth center tomorrow. Well, then it puts me in a panic, because if that's true, then we can't put the kids in there tomorrow. So again, all that emotion, I don't buy it anymore. It's, you know, I'm glad you didn't bring it in. Now, my understanding is, if we did go to Middle School East, it's millions of dollars of renovation for a long skinny place we can't manage right. John Fernandez actually called me, and to his credit, he said, I can't guarantee you anything, but my ability to negotiate with a school or a state facility gets really compromised if you start hacking. And again, I don't buy, well, we only get this little piece of Middle School East. You could have as much as you think would work, if it would work. But I don't see it working now. Okay? Aldo, I think you put $800,000 in as a clawback that we may have to pay the state if we don't use Middle School East as a school. So when I start adding it all up, I mean, $5 million is a ton of money. But if I'm gonna put 3 or something million into spending it to move it into a place that doesn't fit, doesn't make any sense. And I have enough confidence, you know, when we talk to Mike, that you'll continue to not put labels on the kids and to make it so that all Milford kids are welcome. I mean, we have a segment of kids that play football. We built a football stadium. We have a segment that play softball, new softball field. You know, soccer, baseball. Not all the kids.
Don't forget lacrosse.
Lacrosse.
Sport now.
You know, you go through the whole thing. These
Anytime you can hit
kids,
somebody with a stick, it's a good thing.
in my mind, are no more special, no less special than any other segment of Milford kids. We just have to take care of them a little different.
Thanks, John.
My recommendation is going to be to move forward. I hate spending $5 million. My one question that I have is, how close to done is the Armory when we spend $5 million? Okay?
I think the nice thing about this plan that they've come forward with, and it's different than Bogman Henry, they basically stretched out and opened up the main floor, and they've allowed the youth center to grow with it, see what it's gonna be like to live there. Basically, we're gonna be setting up some functional open spaces that can be worked on in the future as the youth center might see fit. If they want to establish a kitchen, for example, we'll have some of the rough work there, then the youth commission can contact Clark, or they can have fundraisers, or they can work towards doing that. If they want to expand their library or their arts and crafts room, they're gonna have the ability to do it. So basically, we're gonna be looking to button up the building, make that main floor open and accessible, and then give the commission an open area, similar to what we did with the senior center in terms of leaving the unfinished rooms upstairs, and now the Shine program went in there, which is generating income for the town. So it's a type of thing where it's gonna allow them to grow into it.
All right, I would recommend that we don't add Middle East into the mix of this discussion. Middle East is a building that's become surplus. The selectmen have to put together a committee to study the uses of that building. And when they come back and study the uses of that building, then we can discuss if the youth center should go in that building and how much space and how we manage it, if we want to do that. Right now, that doesn't exist, so we're speculating. And Al's right, it's only 50 yards across the street. And there's plenty of room in that building, because I walked the building, I didn't see any problems with the building. There's plenty of walls that can go up and plenty of classrooms that can be expanded and opened up. So we can do whatever we want. But I'm not gonna say, what we're gonna do until the selectmen
But first,
Come
the
up with a
school
committee.
committee, don't forget, the school committee still has to declare it surplus.
Let's build
But
the
they
other
already did
building
that.
first.
The what?
You need to build the other one. We haven't built that one yet, so.
Yeah, I know.
The clawback L is 365.
360, still 400.
Yeah, whatever.
65.
This question goes to Marcello and Marty. An excellent presentation, Marcello. You really thoroughly covered the situation.
Thank you.
How comfortable are you as the architect? I don't know which of you two gentlemen is the numbers person. How comfortable are you with the $5 million number?
Well, we're comfortable because we've, first of all, it's not the first estimate we've done on the building. We've been working with a number around that, and it's been fairly consistent through the entire process. We used a cost estimator who our firm's been using for almost 20 years, and has been a very good record with cost estimating. We've established what we think is a reasonable contingency for the project. You never can guarantee anything, obviously. This is kind of an interesting building in that you're gonna need a special type of general contractor who's gonna bid this project. It's not just anybody, so how much bidding interest you get, and we'll do everything we can to identify those people within the parameters of the public bid process. But we think, it's a prudent estimate. Obviously you always wanna have more contingency, but you have to have something that's supportive, in the community, and that based on past experience that we've had, and so on and so forth. So on that level, I think we're.
The reason for the question is, you've termed this as a program, a renovation of the project. It's, from what Marcello presented, it looks more like a rebuild, because there's more than a renovation. By the time you take care of all those support beams and everything else that's in there, so it's closer to a rebuild than it is a renovation, certainly in my mind. But with that said, and forgive me if I ask a question that you absolutely are gonna laugh at. When you did your calculations, we did consider prevailing wage, did we not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, because I didn't wanna wake up tomorrow.
Yes.
And suddenly find out that we're not doing prevailing wage.
Has happened in the past.
Yes,
Bad question.
what, this is for Brian, if you will forgive me. Do we have enough lavatories in the plans that these people are putting together?
After the field program, I know more about toilets than I ever want to know. And actually, Marcello did cite the labs in the basement, which go towards the code requirement, and the committee discussed that. We really did kind of deal with, the number of units and that type of thing, and the number we have gives us the compliance for 500,000?
The occupancy of 500 people in the entire building,
500
which was, we, throughout the process with the committee, what we did is, we evaluated what the cost-benefit scenario would be of making larger bathrooms, because bathrooms require to be pretty large, especially when they have to be accessible. So adding fixtures to a point that the committee felt would give the youth center the right occupancy for all the events that they want to have for fundraising or for the boxing or the sports activities.
That's fine. I mean, it was sort of a funny type question, but I'm sincere when I said, you know, when you go towards it, we don't want to suddenly find out what you found out, that you needed 700 toilets. But the other thing we have, what, just in my mind, because we're making everything accessible, what provisions does that site allow for handicapped parking so an individual is able to get out of their vehicle to that ramp that you described and into the building?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's was one of the things that we first struggled with, because the site, as you saw it, is fairly limited around the building, what you can circulate in a car. But there's the first round of available space for parking right close by to the inception of the ramp that you mentioned, is where we have our handicap parking, and we comply with the handicap numbers that are required by the guidelines. For the amount of parking that we have in this project, really only one handicap spot, van accessible, is required, and we are providing that. And is the spot that is the closest physically possible to the inception of the ramp. In addition to that, what we are envisioning is that when, let's say, a parent has a handicapped child that needs to go to the youth center, we are allowing the first part or in front of that ramp to be a drop-off area so that that child can get down on a wheelchair or what have you, and immediately go on the ramp and get into the grand entrance just like any other person. One thing that we evaluated and we didn't want to consider was, oh, you're handicapped, you have to go on that door over there and go through the lift. We wanted everybody, every child, like you were saying, has to be treated equal, and that's why part of our design is assuming that the entrance is the entrance for everybody, is the center of the building, and is the handicap accessibility entrance, just like for anybody else.
Two more quick things. This isn't your first renovation, I'm quite sure, and it isn't mine either. And what I'm concerned about is the money pit. That's why I started with the first question, because I don't want to suddenly say $400,000 looks to be a pretty good contingency, or 440,000, whatever the number was. It would appear to be a pretty decent contingency. But as the chairman mentioned, if we get the wrong answer from someone or something, then we could be bringing ourselves into a situation where, you know, we're into it for $5 million. We can't walk away from another million if that were the case, because, you know, how are we going to do it? That's why I needed that sense of comfort. And one other thing. Now, someone, I think Brian mentioned that we were going to, the Youth Commission was going to reduce some of the programs and the length of the programs. I still don't understand if the kids are going to still be in that building while it's being rehabbed. They're going to be physically out of that building.
Absolutely.
And where will they be?
For the time being, we don't know exactly what's gonna happen. When the decision is made, that will approach, some type of facility for the kids to be able to go for homework help, computer lab, game room. But as of right now, I do have spread out programs that the kids will be able to go to.
Now, this brings me to a money issue. Assume for a moment that you can't find space within properties owned by the town of Milford, and you have to go out and for 1 year rent property to run some of your programs. Has any of that been factored in to that $5 million or that $440,000? So there's a little.
That would be their operational. I guess the offset on that is, the utilities are budgeted in the town's budget, so that's obviously not going to be used. But I don't know what other, well, actually, your revolving account is quite robust at this point.
You want to say that again?
Just to answer a little more on that, I am looking into other organizations that are on the verge of purchasing a building, and they've stressed to us that if it happens, we can go.
Because if we end up with heavy-duty rental fees, that's going to eat into your contingency. So when you open up that other wall over there and you say, gee, You know, here, we can see Hopedale from that particular wall.
But just to clarify
That's not
again,
part of this budget.
the construction cost has nothing to do
I
with
know,
it.
but something's gotta, whatever we appropriate has to cover.
I think, to Aldo's point, that was basically what my question was about, what's it gonna cost? And it should be part of this project plan, not necessarily within the cost structure, but within the total project plan on how we're gonna manage the kids, where we're gonna put them, and how we're gonna deal with all that, what's it gonna cost. The utilities budget is not in the youth center section, it's in general government.
Right,
So that'll just fall to the bottom line.
right.
They obviously don't have access to that. They do have a significant revolving account. I think it's 67,000 at this point in time, maybe a little bit more. But regardless, but that's, a lot of that is based on rentals and use of the building, no building. So that number is gonna shrink very rapidly, okay?
Okay, just one quick thing. I said that 10
You want,
minutes
do you have one more quick thing?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Jump in. What do you want?
On that document, there was an earlier document I was reading, this, the one you have, Mark, I went back, that's it, Mark, right here. There was a section in there that spoke of exclusions. This does not include, you must have turned the page back, oh, there it is. On what page I bent, so. It says the following items are not included in the total project cost sheets. Escalation clause, absolutely. Clerk of the works, we're not,
Document you're looking at there, excuse me.
this thing.
That's not theirs.
The BH&A,
That's
that's
the
the
old
BH&A, that's the old report.
Bargman Henry
Right.
So,
and Bonnie's
we
memo.
are gonna put it in.
Oh, but
Yes.
Bonnie said
Carrying
that.
Yeah,
That's part of the soft cost.
Hey, Mark,
Just likes to
how
talk.
about other buildings like Memorial Hall or
Okay, all right.
Summer Middle
Time
School
out,
East?
time out. People have questions. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your presentation. You know, I have a couple of questions and a comment. But as I'm watching your presentation and I'm looking at the deterioration of the building, and I'm saying, wow, this is really in rough shape. And this is probably an off-the-wall question, but I feel compelled to ask it. Would it make sense to tear the building down and build something, new?
Guys,
And-
in real
and-
estate, that's what it's called. This is so much renovation, it's a tear down and rebuild.
And I just, you know, I feel a responsibility to ask that question. If we were to duplicate this 33,000 square foot facility, what would that cost? And is there a financial, I understand the historic implications. I'm a Milford native, I like the building, I understand that. But from a practicality point of view and a dollars and cents point of view, is that, what would it cost to do a new youth center?
We did have a slide up there that
Well, that was,
that-
yeah, but
that
that
was
was
for
to
that-
replicate
to replicate that building.
replicate the building.
How much would a
I'm not-
Butler building cost at 30,000 square feet?
less
Not,
than replicating this building.
a lot less, and then a lot less than $127 a square, too.
No,
Yeah, it would.
wouldn't be less
It'd be
than that.
less, it'd be about
It
$100
wouldn't be
a
the
square.
same.
Well, it's,
It's a different argument.
so can I have an answer to that? What would something new cost? Do you have a sense?
Well, we're doing a lot of new buildings, we do a lot of athletic facilities, we do a lot of schools.
Yeah.
I mean, new construction is costing, construction cost anywhere between $250 and $300 a square foot. So, I mean, a Butler building, type of building is probably on the lower end of that, but the systems you have to put in the Butler building and all of that stuff has to meet code, so it's not dramatically different,
No, no.
but it's cheaper. So, yeah, there's a range there, but you're in that range of, $250, $300 a square foot based on work that we're doing right now.
Okay, a
That's the
couple-
best way I can answer it, because I
One
haven't.
other,
No, we can't.
huh?
What's a Butler? Is that like an ugly box?
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Now
He
HVAC,
said it, I didn't.
HVAC and plumbing. Now, I didn't see, or electrical, I didn't see any, what about that whole area of mechanical and electrical? Is that something that we're in good shape?
What
Sure.
we're doing that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
I'm happy to do so. There's two things that we found on the systems of the building. The first one is that the HVAC system, or the heating system of the building, is based on a steam boiler.
Yeah, I've
and
seen
a
it.
steam system that our engineers reviewed, and it turns out the boiler is actually not at all, it's in fairly good shape. So we do anticipate some replacements of some of the radiators and some of the piping, but the system is gonna remain as is, and it can be made to work. So we didn't want to end up replacing something that is in perfectly serviceable condition. So we kept just that as low in the budget as possible, just to make it work.
How about the electrical?
The electrical system is separate, because we're gonna have to put a new fire alarm system.
Yeah.
That's gonna replace completely the existing. We do have to provide additional electrical infrastructure, outlets, and lighting.
Is that part of the 5 million?
It is,
Okay.
yes. And the last part is what Marty mentioned, is the sprinkler system. The building right now is not sprinkled, so by doing this, and that's included, we're gonna fully sprinkle the building, which is gonna elevate the level of safety of the building under a fire, obviously.
Okay, I just have a comment. You know, I think Milford has had a tradition of strong family values, and we've invested in our children, whether it's academic, athletic, cultural. I think we should continue to do that. You know, I hadn't been to the youth center in 5 years, so, you know, I knew this vote was coming. I said, you know something, I have to go visit. So I went to see Jen and Sydney. I have to tell you, I was very impressed. You know, I just got a good vibe, you know, walking into the place, you know, children were engaged. I liked the fact that there was a computer room, that the National Honor Society comes down and tutors the kids. I like the fact that there was a weight room. You know, I think the Youth Commission over the last couple of years has made tremendous progress, really very, very impressed. So, you know, I am for it, but I did have to ask those hard questions. I don't want to do something today for 5 million and then find out 3 years from now we need another 5 million. So you're saying that the HVA system is okay, or the steam boiler is okay, the electrical is going to be up to code and okay, and other than customizing the interior, which we can do over time, but the structural components of the building are in good shape.
Will be.
Will be, yes. Clearly the case. And then to do something new would actually cost twice as much, kind of. And as Al said, would be, what is it, Al? A box.
The ugly box?
Al will just
All right,
write a check.
so again, just to conclude, you know, I support the project. I wish you well with it, and, you know, I really, you know, it's one of those intangibles. I went in yesterday and just really felt good, so, okay.
My only comment would be if the cost, I'm with everybody here, I'm kind of for it. I think it's a tremendous amount of money. If it fits within a debt schedule and it makes sense, and I haven't seen the latest debt schedule, I think we have to consider it. As we said, we put a lot of money into it. I think we owe it to the community to give it full faith and consideration. It's a big project. Again, $5 million is a god-awful lot of money, but I'm kind of for it.
I just want to say to the members of the Youth Commission and the board, I cannot believe that you have been able to do what you've done in the building that you're in. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, Sydney, Jen, Amy, Goose, John, I mean, Mike, all the members of the board, what you guys have done in that building it's really remarkable. And the condition that you guys have in that program is really fantastic. The question that I have for you is that, as of this morning, I'm hearing from the building inspector that building should be shut down. What kind of, and he said in his direct quote that it's not safe for kids. We're talking about construction in maybe September, October, November. What kind of construction costs do we have to get to there? Because right now, he says it's not safe for our children. Do we have costs that we could get Band-Aid repairs to then? Because right now, I don't know how we can send our kids in there when he says it's not safe. So what kind of cost would be involved with something like that?
Let me just kind of clarify that a little bit, because as Marty and Marcello did their work, it became aware to us that there were question about safety. So we asked them to evaluate it, and their structural engineer framed it this way. They asked them whether or not there were any safety concerns in the areas found to be structurally deficient after the site observations. The answer from the structural engineer was that There are no reasons to have an immediate safety concern, provided that the areas in question are used for basic traffic and not for storage of heavy items or furniture. However, should anything change, such as new cracks, visible changes in the floors, ceilings, or walls in those zones, and it becomes apparent, they need to be informed so that then the structural engineer can do it. So that's kind of where we're at, and with Tony DeLuca and John coming on board, knowing that this project was in the pipeline, you know, they kind of let this take the course that it did.
Well, you know why I'm asking the question, Brian, because John said today on the radio
Yeah,
that it's
but-
not safe. So I didn't know if we
There's
had
no
more
question,
money
right.
that,
Didn't he change his
to get
mind?
to September, what kind of costs would be involved, because I mean,
Correct.
he said it, and that's why I
Correct.
just wanna know.
Right.
But he came back later and said that it is safe and that there are no structural damage. He wrote a memo to that effect, to my understanding.
Okay. I mean, that's obviously a huge change in.
I mean, it's the type of thing where it can't go much longer, you know, year, whatever
Oh, I
we're
agree, I
talking
mean, that
about.
place, like I said, I
Right.
don't even know how it's, and I should know if there'd be more costs involved to get us to October, so that, you know, if we could Band-Aid costs.
They're gonna be going into their summer camp program, kids are gonna be dispersed.
Exactly, because I know that they're very busy during those times, and to move a large amount of children into a building where it was quite obvious that it wasn't safe, I just didn't know if we'd be looking at more costs, so.
No.
John has changed his mind and everything's.
Well, he's changed his mind, but I think Mark indicated the interpretation.
Right. Mike, do you have anything?
Well, I just was concerned with timing, Brian, because, you know, typically we deal with capital project items in the fall town meeting. But after seeing the presentation and the deterioration of the building, it certainly makes sense to go ahead with this article in the spring so that we can go out to bid as soon as possible.
Exactly.
Construction. Now, is it better though? I mean, are the youth center programs more impacted in the wintertime or the summertime, or does it make any difference? Yeah.
The thought was that as the summer camp comes in, it's okay, because a lot of the summer camp, kids go out and do stuff, they got the trips and all of that. Once you hit the fall, then you do have more of the kids in. So that would be the time to do the construction, find some temporary programs to Band-Aid it through, and then get this thing through the school year.
Okay, and I'm also appreciative of the presentation. Certainly, I view it as following through on a commitment that we made when we assumed the Armory for its historical purposes, and the youth center needs a home, and so this looks like the right place to go.
I was going around that way. You have anything?
No.
You already spoke. Chuck? Bobby?
No, I think every base has been covered, and we're ready to
Joyce?
support the process.
Just to, you know, the presentation was excellent, excellent. Now, all the outside, the roof and all that, what kind of a warranty is there? How many years? I mean, and then in future, what about maintenance, outside maintenance? What would that entail as far as costs, or just to make, I presume it's probably just like an inspection to make sure that all the repointing and all the mortar is okay, and,
I don't know what the lifespan of the mortar is.
Well, that,
100 years.
on the specifications that we're gonna write for the project are gonna involve all the standard warranties that are typical in the industry for each one of the components, whether it's the roof. And on roofing, for example, you can choose to extend the warranty and buy more warranty than they usually offer and pay a premium for it, but in this case, maybe could be considered worth it. On the repointing, the reason why we are having to spend so much money on the repointing is because really nothing has been done in about 100 years, and what has been done has made the problem worse. That's why what we identify is that we have to make a comprehensive solution to really have the right type of mortar, the right type of scope of work to just get it right. After that, obviously, like any other building, cleaning and maintenance is not gonna be different than any other building. This one is special because of the materials, but as we say, it's been 100 years there. Even with that abuse, it's not going anywhere. So we expect that to continue to be the case.
thank you.
Mr. Kincaid?
Thank you. I guess I'll reiterate the fact that that was a really good presentation. I've seen a lot of those myself with school projects, and that was excellent. I guess touching on a lot of the comments that were said, I know there was a reaction from the crowd when Phil asked some questions, but people have to remember that those questions have to be asked. And like I've said to a couple of folks over here in the front row, this group to me isn't the challenge. You have to go to town meeting and get 2/3. So any question that these people ask aren't to be offensive, they're not to be critical. You want these questions asked, because you're gonna have 220 people asking you these same questions, and you have to get 2/3 of them. So think of this as a dry run, and again, I think this went pretty easy tonight as I expected. I think David Morganelli hit what our actual job is here. Not to hear emotion, not to say, you know, if you don't vote for this, you don't like kids, and things like that. It's the fact that, can we afford it? What does it do to the debt schedule? And we're in really good shape. So I'm not saying we can't afford it, but still, this board's responsibility is to also prove to town meeting and to all the taxpayers and the people watching, because I do think you've made enough of a buzz that a lot of people are watching us tonight. And I'm used to controversial decisions and having death threats in the mailbox and tomatoes thrown and stuff like that. Having a crowd like this at a FinCom meeting is actually pretty encouraging, to be honest with you. Now, I hope, Sydney, first of all, I got a little upset with you because I think you sell yourself short. I think whether it's a long, skinny room at Middle School East or anywhere, you're gonna do a great job no matter what. You know I'm biased. I love your wife. So, you know, when I get in trouble, no, we go back 30 years, a great kid. So, it's just the fact that, you know, if I'm biased, it's in a completely different direction. However, when it came to Middle School East, and I am gonna touch on this, so I asked for a little latitude, Mark. I don't think it was our job as FinCom members to, and it wasn't being done, but it was being brought up a lot, that we should tell you where to be. I had informal conversations, very informal conversations with certain members of the Youth Commission, and I brought that up myself. Why? Because that's what people are talking about. So I think you have to make a bigger case, especially at town meeting, and that's just my advice for whatever it's worth, because people do see one building eventually coming offline, and it's commonsensical to think that, geez, are we gonna fix one and then just have another vacant one? I think what John Fernandez said that Alberto brought up is very promising. And I don't think you could necessarily share a community college with the youth center. Could you do town offices in that? Maybe, but we're actually dealing with the present, not 3 years from now, and that also makes a big difference. But I just want to touch on that again, we're gonna get to the point, because of the school, which we waited, 10, 12 years on, and now a project of this size, and now there's talks of fields and everything else, and again, we wanna do it all, and we wanna find a way to afford it. But I think that at some point, we're gonna end up having to make the really tough decisions and eventually say no. I don't think that's the case today. So this is just, but I just like to say things like that, because it's the same group of people that, well, we just fought this battle, now we wanna come and do this one, and, sooner or later, there's a lot of reasons why we're the best run town around here. And I think that's because we've had to wait. We've had to wait for buildings, we've had to wait for fields, we've had to wait for everything. And sometimes that's just the way it is. I mean, there was no one in this group that I know of anyway that ever thought that this building wasn't in deplorable condition. That wasn't even an argument. The presentation was excellent, but, I don't want to say it was unnecessary, because obviously you need that. But at the same time, that was never a question. I think it's strictly from this board's point of view, we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that, we can pay the bills. I do think, and I think, I'll mention Mike again, Mike Walsh, that, you have a board member that's also on the school committee. So I think you should, if you haven't already, I think you guys should reach out to the school department and work with them, because at least there's one thing we have a lot of in this town is school buildings. For as over, whether they're overcrowded and, maybe Woodland's out, but I would think that you can do something temporarily without completely, hopefully, without completely reducing your schedule of programs. Well, I guess I said more than I thought.
You went on for 20 minutes.
Well,
Getting like
I asked for a little latitude.
You're getting like Reno DeLuzio. Ouch. Ouch.
Well, I got a few more years. So, good luck, and just, again, I think you're gonna have a lot more tougher questions, I imagine, at town meeting, so, good luck.
All right, let me just, there were a few questions asked about the funding, and we'll talk about funding sources later, but to go over this one. We said at town meeting when we did the Woodland project, that we could afford another $4 million on the debt limit, on the debt schedule. Putting $4 million on the debt schedule at this point in time will bring the stabilization account, based on the way we determined we were gonna pay for Woodland, down to about $2.5 million in about 7 years. There's not enough, and I just talked to Irene, and she and I are gonna go over this next week, there's not enough coming off the debt schedule over that period of time that's significant to free up any more debt. Now remember, we had the limitation that we only wanna spend $3.5 million on the debt limit, and the rest of it comes out of the operational budget. We've done all these numbers. So to do this project, which everybody seems to feel is worth doing, we're gonna put a major strain on that account, and so over the next, we may have to say that our recommendation is we don't do any major projects over the next 5 to 7 years that go on the debt schedule. We will continue to put money in for capital on an annual basis, because we do have capital that's coming up. Al's favorites, fire chief needs a new fire truck and all of those things. So we just need to understand that doing this is going to cost the town significant amount of growth over the next 5 to 7 years. And we need to be careful what comes before this committee and town meeting in the way of big money articles. And that's all I'm saying. And we'll bring
I
that.
understand that, Mr. Chairman. I know that the financial team came up with a recommendation, and I know that you worked with them to tweak that so that it's not all bonding, and you've got a combination of free cash and some other things. So I thank you for working with them and coming up with a segregated method to make this thing feasible.
Mark? Motion favorable.
Second.
Second, yeah.
I'll jump in.
We wanna
Any
move.
other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Brian, all the hard work, you deserve a badge, man. You can't go on vacation and you get in trouble.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, meeting's not over. We have other business to conduct.
Yeah, something to always.
You're not gonna get 10 votes.
I'm gonna go look for break in case Bob lets me. I know.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a couple minutes? I've got 3 bottles of water.
No, you can't leave.
I get a cup.
Lock them.
Trouble.
Have a business card. We don't want that.
Absolutely. They've got to cut that presentation down to 30 minutes tops. 30? Tops. Tops.
I mean, obviously, they don't want walls bouncing and whatever, working along, but
Think about it. For a lot of this thing with the kids doing homework and hanging out, what do we do at Memorial Hall 90% of the time? Nothing as important as the kids. In my mind, you could take the kids up there and say, okay, it's our temporary.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're obviously taking a 5-minute break.
You're gonna lose.
All right, we're back, thank you. All right, Article 20,
Thank you.
sorry, Article 32. We postponed the Capital Improvement Committee so the chairman could speak. Before you speak, did you read the memo from
I did.
Jerry?
I did.
So, my question to you is, you want to pass the article over?
My committee hasn't made that determination just yet. We're talking about it, but we don't have an answer on that yet, and until we do, I guess we gotta pretend like it's going forward, just like
All
that.
right, so the next question I have is that everybody in this committee has read the memo from Jerry. What action do we want to take?
Mr. Chairman, if I may speak,
You may.
I read the report from town council, and it seemed to kind of refute everything that was in the article, so I think we should make a motion to disapprove of the article. Unfavorable.
Unfavorable.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Discussion? I mean, I would say refer to sponsor. I mean, give them the opportunity to make their case on town meeting floor.
Well, based on what town council said, I mean, I'm not sure what kind of case they're gonna be able to make, but, and that means, I mean, I would recommend you pass the article over and come back to the town council and try and get it right with him. That'll be my recommendation.
Mark? I can't not see us not supporting Jerry's
Right.
review. However, as a courtesy, if they did meet and they wanted for us to reconsider, I would have no issue before town meeting.
We don't have time. Town meeting is Monday.
Half hour before town meeting, we've done it before.
When's your meeting?
We don't have one.
Oh,
wow.
All right.
sorry.
All in
Yeah.
favor?
Okay, I tried.
Yeah, Dean.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I met with Greg about a week ago, we talked about a lot of issues, and what I recommended to him, I provided some ideas that maybe this committee passed over at this time, inform you tonight or whatever, and then I promised him that it would be, right after town meeting, I would form a committee of myself, the administrator, town council, and himself, and we would review everything, and then come up with something that would be amenable to all. So those are my recommendations to the chairman of the CIC.
Yeah, that's basically what I said, Dean, as well. You know, pass the article over, go back to work with town council and see if you can get it right.
Do they have a recommendation?
Who? What'd
Did
the
you vote
selectmen
on it?
vote?
Monday, I said that, you know, that the chairman was thinking about some of the things I talked about, and that he would probably let you know tonight. So we haven't voted on that.
But has that committee voted on it? Has your
No,
committee
he's not
voted?
met.
Haven't voted at all?
His committee submitted it. The selectmen haven't voted on it. The
Right.
selectmen don't have to vote on it.
And my
You folks have to vote on
my
it.
question was,
What was
Unfavorable,
their
right?
opinion when they submitted it? Favorable?
they put it
They
on
put
the
it in.
warrant.
They put it in.
We put it in
It's in the warrant.
It's on the warrant.
It's in the warrant.
The capital improvement committee requested, I presume unanimously or by majority vote, that it be put in the warrant. The selectmen put it in the warrant. So they
Right.
submitted it, so I presume they're in favor.
And, right, so we have an obligation to take a stand one way or the other on it. My recommendation is you pass the article over. Because based on town council's report, the motion is unfavorable. And I'd rather not see us do that. I'd rather see you guys pass it over.
Well, the other option is to refer to sponsor.
No, but
Or take no action. I don't
Well,
believe this
that's
committee's
essentially,
required.
that's
It's
essentially
$2.
no action.
I wouldn't do that in this particular case because of town council's report. I mean, it just confused everybody on town meeting floor, and town council to get up, and it still confused everybody on town meeting floor.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
You read my memo, and again, it's the second time I've written essentially the same memo, because the same thing came up the previous year. And it's, I don't exactly know what the committee is trying to do with the changes, but I'm sure there's a lot of well-intended changes. They're just not working. They're not structurally right. A number are actually counterproductive to, I think, what they really want to do. And so in both memos, the 2013 and the 2014 memo, I specifically recommended that they meet with the Board of Selectmen and myself to work on it. They haven't done that. And again, they can do what they want, they can go forward, but the logical thing to do is what Dino suggested. Let's meet and find out what they really want to do and have changes that can actually accomplish that, as opposed to these scattershot counterproductive changes.
Correct.
That's all.
Makes sense.
We can debate that on town meeting floor, or we can not, as the case may be.
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
Point of order, there's a
unfavorable.
motion on the floor.
Right, motion on the floor.
That has been seconded.
Can I amend the seconded.
motion?
It's been seconded. Can you amend it?
Just
Yeah,
withdraw
go
the
ahead.
motion.
No, he can amend it if Mike will accept the amendment.
Yeah.
What's the amendment, Chad?
The amendment is that he speak to his committee, and if they decide to go forward, right, we give unfavorable. Other than that, we'll pass
Mr.
over.
Chairman, he can't speak to his committee, there's not a posted meeting, we can't
No.
have a posted meeting
Right.
between now and Monday, so.
Right.
I think your board has to make a decision of one of the three, for it, against, or defer to.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, motion on the floor is unfavorable. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. If you decide to pass it over, we won't give a recommendation. All right, everybody has in their package recommended funding schedule. As you can see, all the articles will be funded out of free cash save. Stormwater management will be raised and appropriate, and 900,000 will come out of the stabilization account we put in last spring.
This year.
You get your,
I thought I did.
came in your packet, was the only thing in there.
So the 900, Mr. Chairman, stays in place.
Here, Bob, use mine.
Yeah, 900 comes out of
I got it
the
out.
short-term stabilization account, not the big one, the small one. 183, just to make it round numbers, for 4 million, because that's what we said we can manage on the debt,
The long-term capital account,
long-term capital debt,
not stabilization, so there's no confusion. Long-term capital.
right.
Okay, so that's where that's going.
That's what?
The 900 is going where? Say that again?
The 900 is going to offset the 5.1 million to make the long-term debt 4 million. The 900 and the 183, 254. All right, and the reason that I asked that it be all taken out of free cash and very little out of the levy capacity is we have a lot of things coming up that if we end up adding the 4 million to the debt, we're not gonna be able to fund unless we fund it out of the levy and free cash. So I wanted to try and save as much as we could in levy capacity, knowing that it's gonna be less of a hit to the taxpayer in the short term than putting it on the debt schedule, because more on the debt schedule, obviously, we're gonna have to hit the ops budget, and then a lot of other things happen.
You had asked a question about the very large Tui toy,
Yeah.
you know, the ladder truck.
Yeah.
That is in 2 years.
2 years.
Next year was to rebuild the tower, and I haven't talked to the new chief.
Yeah.
We'll do that next month, but it's 300 and change to rebuild the training tower, 20 grand for, I think it's the radio stuff. So it's about 320, 330.
Yep.
It's the year after that was targeted for the $1 million
Well,
Tui toy.
If we continue to manage the way we manage the budget and the finances and recommend the right things, I think we'll continue to increase the levy capacity, which will help us offset some of the long-term debt. Because remember, our plan was, with the school, was to put 500,000 every year
Yep.
to the long-term debt, and then take the difference out for the payment, right? So if we put more, which this year we're gonna put 250,000, which we usually do it in the fall, but we have some excess, so we're gonna do it in the spring. And the more we put in, the less that stabilization account's gonna be hit.
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sure.
Just to expand on comments you made earlier when we were talking about the youth center and the
Yep.
funding and the bonding. We have to be very careful we don't fall behind in our maintenance of our buildings and infrastructure in this
Correct.
town. That happened to us 12, 13 years ago when it cost us in excess of 30 million to fix the schools.
Right.
So I think we have to watch this very closely, and at all costs, we have to fund the maintenance.
Well, Rob
You have to.
Quinn is doing a heck of a job with the school system. I mean, those buildings.
And I don't
are
mean just the
impeccable.
schools, everywhere.
No, I know.
Village.
We're doing work in town hall, we did work on the police station, doing work on the library. I think we're doing well.
We are,
We're
we
managing
we
it
just
very
need to keep
well,
our eye on
and-
the ball.
Right. We asked all town departments to tell us age of the HVAC systems, age of the roof, age
Did you?
of the,
Yeah.
of the major components, so we can gauge when some of these things would.
Oh, good,
would
good, I was
come to
unaware of
fruition.
that. It's a
Yeah.
good, that's a
Yeah.
good initiative, yeah.
The other thing
Always.
that's really helped is the school committee, to this day, has lived up to their word. Because if you think about it, a lot of our capital
Used to be.
outlay used to go to the schools. And they told us they would hold off for 3 or 4 years if they got the new Woodland School with the lockers. I mean, it was all hundreds, 200s of
Right.
And
thousands.
they're doing that.
And to their credit, they haven't come back and asked for a penny, and that's what's helping us kind of stay afloat.
Right. And Rob manages all of that very well. He staggers all of the capital needs.
And do
So-
you think we've adequately identified the funding need for the TI group in this town? Or are we at that juncture yet?
The what?
IT.
IT group? Oh, TI group.
TI.
You dyslexic?
No, that's a term we use in the phone company, you wouldn't, but,
What, have we identified it? We've identified some of it, my guess, and I've talked with Chris and Rick. I think we're probably looking at a couple, 3 million over the next 3 or 4 years in capital.
Okay.
But I think we can manage that in the free cash and the budget and everything else.
As long as we stay to your program, where you've said no non-emergency, we're not gonna build any new little towers or fields or stuff. Because if you suck up 2-3 million on each of those projects, then we don't have money to fund. Because I think Mark's right, we're putting 3 people in with a mission, and they're gonna come back and tell us
Right.
what they need to do to get this town to the level that we should be at.
yeah, I agree, no, I'm fully supportive, but as you know, Al, things fall from the sky.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, for instance, I got a call from Scotty that he got 2 grants for the Godfrey Brook and the other brook, okay? That's 680 or 780,000 bucks, of which we have to put in 25%. So there's 250K that we have to put up.
But you
And
gotta
that-
put it up.
But we,
You
yeah,
gotta
we-
put it
we
up.
gotta, of course, but where are we gonna get the money from, right? So,
You're gonna find it.
you put it on the levy. If you have the capacity, you put little chunks on the levy. And that's why I did what I did. The other thing on this, if you realize, or if you look at it, earmark stabilization contribution, $1 million. Okay, short-term stabilization, $250, and tax relief, $1.4 million. That's the plan.
Yes.
Paying off snow and ice in the spring this year instead of in the fall. So we'll have extra money in the fall, okay, to do that. It still leaves us with about 400,000 in free cash. And,
It's the tightest we've been in a long time.
yeah, it's tight,
It's okay.
tight.
No,
We
it's
got-
good, but
got
it's
a month and a
still-
half.
Yeah, still maintaining the levy relief, though.
Yep.
Yep, yep. All right, I don't know, you wanna vote on this, don't wanna vote on this, or don't care?
Motion favorable.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Opposed? Great. We already voted on Article 4, so that's done. We're done. Town
Motion to
meeting.
go home.
Yes.
Well, I just want to say one thing to you.
Oh,
You did a good job, appreciate your efforts. I mean, you are making a lot of moves for us, pushing us in the right direction.
well, I
And,
bring it here, you know, you guys can argue with me.
Really, you've done a great job,
I thank
appreciate
you.
that.
I second that, Mark. Nice job.
Could I use a different adjective than push?
Oh, yeah, next month.
No, I agree.
If anybody wants to run for chairman, let me know, because
It's all yours,
I
Mark.
don't need any more of these.
No, we've
We're all set,
decided.
thank you, good night.